to break promises.
I got a text about, asking if I wanted to go to his funeral, and I think they're trying to lure me.
She was actually on the phone talking to me and got ambushed. I realized that she was in danger.
She said, no. And I knew something was wrong.
It began like any ordinary autumn evening, but by nightfall, a haunting silence would settle over the University of Utah campus, broken only by the crack of gunfire and the desperate cries that would echo long after. Behind the brick walls of student dormitories and empty parking lots, a deadly secret unraveled, and the world soon discovered the systemic cracks that failed to protect a 21-year-old athlete named Lauren McCluskey.
She was a senior.
Yes.
To break promises. I don't want to hurt you, but I need to breathe. At the end of it all, you're still my best friend. But there's something inside that I need to release.
She wasn't just a name in the news. Lauren McCluskey had everything: talent, heart, intelligence, and the kind of presence that left an impression long after she left the room. But what no one expected was how her shining light would be extinguished in the most chilling way imaginable, and how the very institutions built to protect her would let her fall into the abyss. Lauren McCluskey was not just another college student. No, she was a force of nature wrapped in kindness, precision, and brilliance. Born on February 12, 1997 in Berkeley, California, Lauren possessed a spirit that shimmered like a distant star too bright to ignore. Her eyes held warmth, but her heart held steel. She was kind, yes, but never naive. Intelligent, but never arrogant. Energetic, determined, with a voice that rarely raised above a whisper, but always commanded attention.
Lauren didn't care what you looked like. She didn't care where you came from. Sort of fearless. Every parent says this, but she was a very kind person.
From the earliest days, it was clear Lauren was different. At just 8 years old, she broke national records in track and field, a feat not of mere talent, but of sheer relentless will. Her legs seemed carved for flight, her breath synchronized with victory. By the time she was a teenager, she had already placed top 8 in national competitions, an astonishing 19 times. As a freshman in Washington State, she claimed the high jump championship like a queen ascending her throne. Her next stop, the elite Spire Institute, a cradle for prodigies, and then a full scholarship to the University of Utah, where her athletic dreams would continue to unfold. Until they didn't. Lauren wasn't just an athlete, she was a giver.
I thought of Utah as a very safe place. There's a strong church attendance and membership there, and fewer people drink, and I just thought, Utah would be a safe place for her to go.
While others chased fleeting fame or party lights, Lauren gave her time to those who needed it most. She volunteered at YMCA. She brought joy to athletes with special needs at the Special Olympics. And in the quiet corners of local animal rescue shelters, she worked with feral cats, gently socializing them one paw at a time so they could find loving homes. That was Lauren, always helping others find their place in the world, even as hers was slipping from under her feet. Academically, she was razor sharp. Majoring in communication, Lauren held herself and others to a high ethical standard. She didn't play games. She didn't crave the wild college life. Her world was built on quiet trust, private jokes with her roommate Alex, and a close-knit circle of friends. Her presence was grounding, her loyalty unwavering. But darkness doesn't always arrive with a warning. And in Lauren's case, it crept in slowly, disguised in charm, hiding behind a smile, feeding on her empathy. What she didn't know was that behind the scenes, a sinister game was unfolding. One she never agreed to play. One she never stood a chance of surviving. The aftermath sent shockwaves across the country. How could this happen? How could a promising young woman who did everything right still end up dead? How could an institution ignore such clear warning signs? The University of Utah launched internal investigations. Promises were made, apologies issued. What happened next isn't just a story. It's a horror tale that unfolds like a twisted thriller where trust is shattered, institutions fail, and a young woman's life is thrown into a deadly spiral. In the shadows, someone was watching her, studying her, learning her schedule, learning her fears. The clock ticked mercilessly, and when it struck, Lauren was alone. Alone with her instincts, alone with a phone that dialed for help that didn't come fast enough, alone with a monster who wore the mask of a man. And her story, it's not over. Because even in death, Lauren speaks. Don't let her story fade into silence. Her story is a thunderclap, a gut-wrenching reminder of how quickly light can be extinguished when danger is dismissed. Her name has become a rallying cry for reform, safety, and accountability, a symbol that whispers to every young woman, your voice matters, your fear is real, and you are not alone. In the weeks leading up to Lauren McCluskey's tragic death, a series of unsettling events unfolded, each one setting the stage for the horror that would eventually tear apart her life. The young college student whose future was full of promise was unknowingly stepping into a nightmare where each missed opportunity for intervention only deepened her vulnerability. From the moment she met Melvin Rowland, a man who wore a mask of charm and deception, the chain of events was set into motion, leading to a horrifying end. It all began on September 2, 2018, at the London Bell Bar in Salt Lake City. Lauren McCluskey, a bright, energetic university student, had no idea that the man she met that evening would become the villain in a story so chilling it would leave a scar on the entire community. Roland, posing under a fake name and age, worked as a security guard at the bar. But beneath this carefully crafted facade was a dangerous predator with a disturbing history, one that he hid from Lauren along with his sex offender status. Despite his deceitful appearance, Roland frequented McCluskey's dorm, creating a false sense of trust. His charm and manipulation soon made Lauren feel at ease, blinding her to the warning signs. She didn't know it yet, but his presence in her life was a ticking time bomb, one that would soon explode with terrifying consequences. What followed was a whirlwind romance that at first seemed too perfect to be questioned. They climbed together both mountains and emotional highs. Their first official date involved scaling rocks and sharing laughs over dinner. Lauren, normally cautious, was swept into his orbit. Something about Sean felt oddly magnetic. He made her feel special, protected, seen. But beneath that polished smile, a predator was hiding. Within a week, the tone shifted. The man who once praised her independence now demanded submission. He insisted they become exclusive fast. He started giving Lauren commands disguised as concern. Text me when you get home. Don't wear that. Who are you with? Send me a picture. He disguised control as care, possession as passion. Soon the sweet messages became surveillance. The affectionate voice turned sharp. She was no longer dating a man, she was being monitored by one. Yet Lauren, ever the thinker, began to notice cracks, the inconsistencies, the way he dodged questions about his past. And then came the moment that shattered the illusion. As the days passed, Roland's behavior grew more possessive and controlling. On September 26, 2018, Lauren confided in her friends, complaining about how Roland was keeping her isolated. He didn't allow her to see her friends, and her social circle began to notice the red flags. The sense of manipulation, the subtle threats, and the escalating tension were becoming too much to ignore. Her friends, alarmed, began to voice their concerns. Something was terribly wrong. Yet despite their worries, the signs of danger were dismissed. Her friends suspected that Roland was using her, but the matter was far more complex and sinister than they had realized. Little did they know the pieces of this puzzle were slipping through the cracks, never fully pieced together until it was too late. By September 30th, 2018, Roland's controlling behavior had escalated to the point where Lauren's friends could no longer stay silent. They reported his troubling actions to the university housing staff, highlighting his constant presence in her dorm room, his disturbing talk about firearms, and his blatant disregard for boundaries. Yet tragically, the seriousness of the situation was undermined. The report, though filed, never made it to the police. Instead, it was dismissed as a mere violation of housing rules. The warning signs of a violent predator were ignored, and the system failed to act. It was clear if this information had been properly communicated to law enforcement, Lauren's fate could have been different. But as the clock ticked on those in charge, failed to connect the dots, leaving her vulnerable to the growing threat that Roland posed. October 2nd, 2018. Lauren, trusting her instincts, did what every person in love dreads. She investigated, and what she found wasn't just a lie, it was a living nightmare. By October 9, 2018, Lauren's worst fears were realized. She uncovered Roland's true identity. He was not the charming, harmless man he pretended to be. He was 37 years old, a convicted sex offender with a past so dark it made her stomach turn. Disgusted and frightened, Lauren ended things with him, but the grip of his control didn't loosen. He still managed to stay in her life, borrowing her car and showing up uninvited. But monsters don't let go. They hunt. And Melvin Roland, he wasn't done with her. What came next was psychological warfare. The power he held over her was suffocating, and Lauren's anxiety grew by the day. On October 10th, she received a disturbing message from someone claiming to be Roland's friend. The message urged her to take her own life. This was the moment when Lauren began to understand that she was not dealing with just a manipulative man. She was the target of someone capable of extreme violence and coercion. With each passing day, Lauren's fear intensified. On October 10th, her mother, Jill McCluskey, became involved, sensing something was horribly wrong. Jill reached out to the university's safety center, asking for help to ensure Lauren's safety as she retrieved her car. At first, Lauren refused, but her mother's concerns were justified, and after a bit of convincing, Lauren reluctantly agreed. Yet even with her mother's intervention, the danger was still looming, and Lauren remained trapped in a toxic relationship with Roland. She was too afraid to act decisively, too isolated to escape the web he had spun around her. And as she stood on the precipice of disaster, no one seemed to grasp the full extent of the peril she was in. On October 12th, Lauren took a crucial step. She contacted the police about a threatening message she had received, a message telling her that Roland had died. But this was just another twisted game he was playing with her mind. The message was a violation of his parole, a cruel reminder of how far Roland would go to torment her. But once again, the authorities seemed slow to react, and behind the scenes, Roland was watching, plotting. Every moment she thought was safe was a step closer to the end. This was no longer a case of heartbreak. It was the opening act of a calculated hunt, and Lauren was the prey. The man she once kissed was now stalking her shadow. The police, including Officer Miguel Duras, handled the situation, but failed to connect the dots regarding Roland's parole violations. They treated the matter as a minor offense, not realizing the escalating danger Lauren faced. Had they looked deeper into Roland's history, they might have discovered the extent of his depravity. Instead, they allowed him to slip through their fingers once again. Just one day later, on October 13, 2018, Lauren reported an even more disturbing incident. Roland was blackmailing her for $1,000, threatening to release explicit photos of her unless she paid him. This was the final warning, the last chance to intervene before the tragedy unfolded. But even then, the police failed to take immediate action. Officer Darris, who was handling the case, never followed up on Roland's criminal background or his history of threats. He didn't check the parole status or investigate the seriousness of the blackmail. The urgency of the situation was clear. Lauren was at risk, and her cries for help were ignored. As each day passed, the likelihood of her escaping Roland's grip diminished. The pieces of the puzzle were there, but they were never connected in time to save her. As the days ticked by, the chance for intervention slipped further and further away. And on that fateful night in October, Lauren McCluskey's life was taken by a predator who should never have been allowed to get so close. In the shadows, a predator lay in wait. Roland, a man who had been stalking Lauren throughout the day, was ready to strike. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, it was planned. Roland, driven by dark obsession, had been following Lauren, watching her every move, waiting for the moment to pounce. He had even managed to obtain a gun from a fellow security guard, Nathan Vogel, which would seal her fate. At 8:10 p.m., as Lauren spoke to her mother, the unthinkable happened. The conversation was abruptly cut off, with Lauren's desperate cries, "No, no, no," echoing through the phone before silence fell. The line went dead. Her mother, frantic, could only hear the sound of the phone and the rustling of her daughter's fallen belongings. The world had just become a much darker place. Lauren's body was discovered later that night, hidden in the back of a silver Buick. The horror of what had occurred was clear. 7 bullet wounds marred her lifeless form. But even then, the nightmare wasn't over. Roland's plan didn't end with the murder. He wasn't just after Lauren's life, he sought his own twisted escape. After killing her, he fled the scene, slipping into the night in a car driven by a woman he met through a dating app. This woman, unaware of the bloodshed that had just occurred, unwittingly became his accomplice. The chase that followed was brief. yet it sealed Roland's fate. At 1 a.m. on October 23, 2018, police closed in on him. The tension was thick in the air as Roland, feeling the walls close in, chose his final act, suicide. He took his own life in a church, leaving behind a trail of destruction, pain, and unanswered questions. The community of Salt Lake City was left reeling, struggling to understand how this horrific tragedy could have unfolded in their midst. In the aftermath of Lauren's death, the University of Utah took immediate action. Classes were canceled the following day, a symbolic gesture to honor Lauren's life and to allow the community time to grieve. However, the devastation went far beyond the campus. A memorial service was held, drawing hundreds of people who came to mourn and to remember a young woman whose life had been brutally cut short. Her friends, her loved ones, her fellow students, all of them were left grappling with the intense weight of loss. Diamond, Lauren's close friend, stood at the memorial, battling her own feelings of regret. She voiced her guilt at not doing more to protect Lauren, to stop the nightmare that was unfolding before them. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the community and the world at large struggled with the aftermath of Lauren's death. The questions hung in the air, unanswered and unresolved. How had Roland been able to continue his stalking of Lauren without raising an alarm? Why had law enforcement not acted on his previous violent behaviors? Could anything have been done to prevent her tragic end in the wake of her death? Lauren's family and friends vowed to honor her memory by ensuring her story would not be forgotten. They sought justice not just for her, but for the countless others who might fall victim to a similar fate if the lessons from this case were ignored. Lauren's tragic end became a rallying cry for change, calling attention to the flaws in the systems meant to protect the vulnerable. It was a reminder that sometimes justice comes too late. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting for it. The response of the institutions, from law enforcement to the university, revealed the depth of their failure and the systemic issues that allowed such a tragedy to occur. This period marked not only the investigation into Lauren's death, but also a series of public revelations that would shake the very foundation of how safety was handled in the University of Utah and beyond. The University of Utah Police Department's response to the growing threat posed by Melvin Roland was marked by apathy and an almost criminal disregard for Lauren's safety. Early on, when Lauren's friend Diamond and her resident assistant reported concerns about Roland's behavior on October 2, 2018, it should have been a call for immediate action. Diamond had warned that Roland might be bringing a gun to Lauren, an alarming claim that in any other scenario would have sparked a full investigation. But instead, Lauren's concerns were dismissed by her superiors as trivial and unimportant. This was just the beginning. The university police failed to follow up on this report or investigate Roland's background. Despite the clear warning signs, no one thought to check Roland's criminal record. Had they done so, they would have discovered his past as a convicted sex offender, a crucial detail that would have raised immediate red flags. Instead, police officer Miguel Daras justified their inaction by downplaying Lauren's fears. He claimed that since Lauren hadn't explicitly mentioned fear or domestic violence, there was no cause for concern. This reasoning was not only a poor excuse, it was a dangerous oversight. The evidence of blackmail, harassment, and Roland's criminal history was clear, yet the police chose to ignore it. Lauren's cries for help were repeatedly ignored by the very authorities sworn to protect her. On October 13, 2018, when Lauren reported the sexual blackmail and the threat of explicit photos being released, the police's response was a slap in the face. Instead of treating this as a serious criminal act, Officer Daras took Lauren's statement in a casual manner right in the lobby of the station. He dismissed her report as a scam and promised to investigate further, but his promises were empty. Nothing was done, no action was taken, and once again Lauren was left vulnerable. The investigation was delayed further when Detective Kayla Dalif, assigned to the case, did not show up to assist until October 23rd. By then, it was far too late to save Lauren. The system's inability to act quickly left her defenseless, trapped in a dangerous situation with no immediate help on the horizon. The horror didn't end with missed calls for help or delayed responses. In a disturbing breach of privacy, Officer Daras, who had been entrusted with Lauren's personal and sensitive information, shared her private photos with other officers without any legitimate investigative purpose. These photos were supposed to be confidential, critical evidence in the case of sexual blackmail. But instead, they were used inappropriately, turning Lauren into a victim once again. The trust she placed in the police was shattered. No disciplinary action was taken against Officer Daris, leaving a stain on the police department's integrity that would forever haunt Lauren's memory. The failures didn't stop with the University of Utah's police force. When Lauren reached out to the Salt Lake City Police Department hoping for a resolution, her case was handed back to the university police with an offhand remark that it was their jurisdiction, not theirs. This transfer of responsibility only served to delay action further. Lauren's voice, her desperate calls for help, were lost in a bureaucratic system that failed her at every turn. Her story was being tossed around like an unwanted file, each department passing it along with the excuse that it wasn't their problem. This lack of coordination of accountability ensured that Lauren never received the support she needed. Every minute wasted, every phone call brushed aside, drew her closer to the nightmare she would soon endure. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this tragic story is the role played by the parole system. Melvin Rowland, a man with a criminal past that should have kept him behind bars, was granted parole in April 2018, just months before he crossed paths with Lauren. Despite his previous violations, such as using dating apps and testing positive for marijuana, Rowland was allowed to walk free. His parole officer only gave him a verbal warning for these violations, never considering the risk he posed to society. Had Rowland been reincarcerated after his prior offenses, he would never have had the opportunity to meet Lauren, to manipulate and control her, to blackmail her, and ultimately to take her life. His release was a catastrophic failure of the parole system, a system that should have kept dangerous offenders like Rowland off the streets. His past was clear, his history of violence evident, yet he was allowed to continue his life as if nothing had happened. The consequences of this failure are heartbreakingly clear. Rowland was free to destroy Lauren's life because of a system that failed to do its job. The combined failures of the University of Utah's police department, the Salt Lake City Police, and Rowland's parole officer created a perfect storm of inaction. Each institution failed in its duty to protect Lauren, either by dismissing warnings, misplacing responsibility, or mishandling evidence. But perhaps the most painful part is that these failures didn't happen by accident. They were the result of systemic flaws, a lack of coordination, and an institutional indifference that allowed a predator to roam free, unchecked. Lauren McCluskey's story is a tragic illustration of what happens when a system designed to protect its citizens fails them. It's a story of a young woman who, despite all her efforts to escape, was left unprotected by the very institutions meant to keep her safe. Her murder was not just the result of Rowland's actions, it was the consequence of a series of failures by those entrusted with the power to stop him. And as Lauren's family and friends mourned, the community was left asking one unanswerable question: how many others are out there slipping through the cracks? Her death is a warning, a chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the dangers posed by a system that refuses to act in time. It is a tragedy that never should have happened, one that could have been prevented if only the authorities had listened, acted, and investigated the threat before it was too late. It was late in the evening on October 23, 2018, when a statement from Brophy, a representative from the University of Utah, stunned the public. He falsely claimed that the police had already located Melvin Rowland. This misleading statement was later exposed as a lie, adding to the growing frustration and distrust among the public. The reality was much darker. The police had not found Rowland, and the investigation was still in its early stages, full of holes and unanswered questions. The next day, October 24th, 2018, further revelations came to light when the parole department disclosed a conversation they had with Rowland on October 16th. Shockingly, the parole officer was completely unaware of the ongoing harassment and blackmail that Rowland had been committing against Lauren. This failure of communication within the parole system was another painful reminder of the numerous opportunities that had been missed to prevent the tragedy. The anger and disbelief reached a boiling point on October 25, 2018, when Brophy again addressed the media. This time he was visibly emotional, revealing the details of Rowland's harassment, including the blackmail and the stalking that Lauren had endured. It was a moment of clarity, but it came far too late. As the public's outrage grew, Ruth Watkins, the University of Utah president, announced the initiation of an independent investigation into the university's handling of the case. Meanwhile, Governor Gary Herbert ordered an investigation into the parole department's role in Rollins' release. The mounting pressure began to push the system into motion, but for many it felt like an attempt to cover up the extent of the failures rather than a genuine search for accountability. The fallout continued as the Utah Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing, DOPL, fined Black Diamond, the company where Roland had worked under a false identity. The company had failed to properly vet him, and their negligence had indirectly contributed to his ability to evade scrutiny. But this was just the beginning. While these actions seemed like steps in the right direction, the McCluskey family and the public demanded much more. As the investigation deepened, disturbing new revelations emerged. On October 27, 2018, two women who had previously been deceived by Roland came forward with their own accounts of manipulation and lies. They revealed how Roland had used false identities and preyed on their vulnerabilities just as he had done with Lauren. The pattern of deception and control was becoming clear to investigators. Roland had a long history of deceit, and it was a history that should have never been ignored. The investigation began to reveal the depth of the failures, but it was also clear that the system would not be quick to admit its mistakes. Despite the growing body of evidence, there were still attempts to justify the inaction. On November 13th, Jill McCluskey took to social media to demand answers, tweeting her frustrations over the handling of Roland's access to firearms. She called for the prosecution of the person who had lent Roland the gun he used to kill Lauren. It was a desperate plea, but it also signaled the beginning of a larger public push for justice. The public's outrage, the McCluskey family's relentless pursuit of justice, and the growing awareness of these systemic failures sparked the beginning of much-needed reforms. But for Lauren McCluskey, and for so many others whose stories remain unheard, the changes came far too late. Her death, though tragic, ignited a fire for reform, one that still burns today, as those who loved her continue to fight for the justice she was denied in life. The tragic case of Lauren McCluskey is not just a story of loss. It is a powerful wake-up call for universities across the United States about their responsibility to protect students from domestic violence and harassment. It underscores the importance of listening to and acting on reports from students, especially young women who are often overlooked. The failure to act on Lauren's cries for help led to an irreversible tragedy, one that could have been prevented if the institutions involved had taken her warning seriously. This case highlighted a glaring weakness in how universities handle student safety. It revealed how easy it is for dangerous individuals to slip through the cracks if institutions failed to take reports seriously. The lack of action not only put Lauren's life at risk, but also exposed the vulnerability of countless other students who may be suffering in silence. In the aftermath, the University of Utah became a focal point for reform. The changes they implemented in response to the McCluskey case have since been adopted by other institutions across the country, with many colleges reassessing and updating their campus safety policies. These reforms are setting a new standard, urging universities to create safer environments where students feel heard and supported. Lauren's death, while heartbreaking, served as a catalyst for raising awareness about domestic violence on college campuses. In the wake of the tragedy, more schools began to implement training programs aimed at increasing awareness of personal safety and recognizing signs of abuse. This shift is critical in ensuring that students, particularly young women, are not left vulnerable to exploitation or violence. The Lauren McCluskey Foundation, established by her family, continues to operate and provide support for victims of violence. It funds research into campus safety and domestic violence prevention, while offering a platform for students to report suspicious behavior without fear of being ignored. The foundation has become a beacon of hope, turning Lauren's legacy into a tool for change. One of the most chilling lessons learned from this tragedy is the importance of conducting thorough background checks, especially when there are reports of suspicious behavior. If law enforcement had checked Melvin Roland's criminal history, they would have discovered his status as a convicted sex offender on parole. This simple action might have led to his arrest before the worst could happen. The failure to do so is a stark reminder of how vital it is to vet individuals, especially when concerns about their behavior arise. Lauren's story is a painful reminder that prevention often starts with the smallest of actions. Actions that, if taken seriously, can save lives. Her legacy continues to inspire changes that will hopefully prevent future tragedies, ensuring that no other student has to face the same fate.